The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein, former publisher of Automotive News, is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.
Hi, I'm Jason Stein, host of Cars and Culture. Before we get to this week's interview, I want to say that this episode is brought to you by Connected by Reynolds & Reynolds. I love the conversations I get to have on this show because they're exactly that. They're conversations. Another podcast I found worth checking out for conversations is Connected by Reynolds & Reynolds. Greg Ulan goes deep with guests on everything from used car acquisitions to finding your niche and selling to it. I definitely recommend adding Connected to your rotation.
Welcome to Cars and Culture, episode 114. I'm your host, Jason Stein. What an 18-month journey for a multi-decade veteran of Formula One. Perhaps, in some ways, unimaginable. When team principal Otmar Szafnauer made the seismic jump from Aston Martin to Alpine in the winter of 2022, the sky was the limit. Alpine, as a new brand under the Renault umbrella, had serious ambitions. And going into this year, it had new driver Pierre Gasly, who joined Esteban Ocon. It had the commitment of resources to build the team into a winner. And it had Otmar Szafnauer, a man who cut his teeth at Ford, then Honda, and Aston Martin, taking F1 teams that had little budget and making something happen. But as in most stories within the Formula One community, the road was not a straight one. Disappointment after disappointment followed. Cars sometimes ran into each other. And team management at Alpine sometimes came out quite critically. After the Miami race this year, the team was labeled as amateurish, and that was from Alpine leadership, publicly. But the ultimate blow occurred just this month, when Otmar was abruptly let go following the race in Belgium. Early on, Renault management promised a 100-race timeline for improvement, podiums, and success. Otmar Szafnauer got 33 races. Today, after a long career inside Formula One, he's on a forced break. A 12-month vacation from Formula One as required by his separation agreement with Alpine. What happens after that? Only he knows. But what we know today is the real story. Here, for the first time in his only interview about the departure, Otmar Szafnauer tells all. He talks about impatience within Renault. He talks about inexperience. And he talks about when the wheels truly started to fall off. 2 weeks after the shocking news and 1 day after his 59th birthday, a Cars and Culture exclusive with Otmar Szafnauer.
Hi, my name is Otmar Szafnauer, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
He probably doesn't want to talk about it, but he did celebrate a birthday yesterday. And it is very appropriate to have him on the program to celebrate his birthday. He is back in England and looking better than ever. Otmar, what a pleasure to see you again.
Well, nice to see you, and nice to see you in this, guys, or on this show.
Yes, exactly. Well, thanks for being on SiriusXM. How did you spend your birthday?
Well, it was, my birthday this year fell on a Sunday, so that makes it a little bit different than some of the other days. Sunday's a bit special. And my neighbors a long time ago invited me to a party, not necessarily a birthday party, but a party they were having. They usually live in Monaco, but because they're both Oxford graduates, they also have a townhouse here in Oxford. So they invited some of their friends round for a lunch, and they invited us as well. So I went to lunch there.
I know you had a goal stated at one point with a friend of yours. You said 6-pack by the time you're 60.
Yeah, I still have a year to go. He unfortunately didn't achieve it, but he came close. So I've got some work to do, but I've got enough time to achieve it.
Yeah. You're celebrating under interesting circumstances, which we're going to get to in a moment. But I want to talk about the vacation that I know you want to do and the time that you want to take. And I know that you wanted to spend some time with your son, Finley, who is a golfer, a college golfer, and also stretch the legs on a vehicle across Germany. Is that still going to happen, both those things?
Yeah, that that's still going to happen. He's in Paris now with some other Dartmouth golf team members, and then he's back in a couple of days, and the season starts almost immediately when they return to university. So he's got to get ready for that. There's a couple of competitions that he's signed up for here in England, and he's got to put the time and effort in now. I mean, he's taken 10 days off to go to France, southern France, and Paris, but the rest of the time he's been working and golfing. But now is the time to put some intensive effort in before the start of the season.
He'll be in his sophomore year, right?
Sophomore year, and at the university they do this thing called sophomore summer. So this year he's going to be gone for quite some time. I think he'll be back at Christmas, but then after Christmas he'll be gone for almost 9 months because they stay on campus. All the sophomores stay on campus. There's the summer term of their sophomore year.
Back to your Ford days, you have a 2016 Ford GT, and I know you're interested in going trans-European with it, right? You still planning to visit your father in Germany?
Yeah, so I think it'll be nice to take the Ford GT to visit my dad in Germany, and then I've got some cousins in Romania, and it'll just be a nice drive. There's good places to stop. Vienna on the way, Munich. I've got a friend in Zurich. Budapest is a nice stop too. So there's some nice cities to stop and take in on the way to visiting, both my dad and then the Romanian cousins, and they're just over the Hungarian border. And as a matter of fact, that part of the country was Hungary at one point in time, and then I think the First World War changed the borders and it became Romania. So it's not that far into Romania. It's about a 2.5 hour drive from Budapest, and I enjoy Budapest. I've raced there, 25 years in a row now, but I've never really had the time when we're racing to take in a lot of the culture. So it'd be just nice to spend 2-3 days in Budapest, not worry about working and enjoying the city.
Time is what you have now. It's got to be very strange for you this summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's not strange yet because I left just as everybody was going on break. So this was a natural break anyway. I think it'll become a little bit more foreign when the racing starts again and I've got time in my hands. But I'll soon figure out how to best use that time and put my skill set to work.
First time away from the track in how long, Otmar?
So in 2008 to 2009, I had a year off as Honda left Formula One, and I took a job with Force India. So since 2008.
14, 15 years.
Yeah.
Let me get into it. What happened?
Well, I think the senior management at Renault, the CEO Luca De Meo, wants, as everyone does in Formula One, wants success instantly, and unfortunately, that's not how it works in Formula One. So, I pointed out to him that it takes time and the process of doing it, what's required, and having raced for 34 years and 26 years of it in Formula One, I think I speak with a degree of experience when I say this is what it takes to turn a team around. And they wanted to do it faster than is possible. And I just, I couldn't agree to an unrealistic timeline because if you do that, it's only a matter of time and everyone gets frustrated. So I laid out a very realistic and possible plan. And I think they wanted to shortcut that plan with somebody else.
What was your plan?
Well, I hired. So that there's a couple of things you have to do, and I don't want to give away, the things I know. But there's a few things you have to do in any business. Is if you want to turn things around, one, you have to have a deep understanding of what you have in the first place. So take a good look, understand what you have deeply, understand what's good, and understand what needs changing or what needs. Sometimes it doesn't even need change; it just needs enhancing. There could be skill sets that are not there at all. It's not that there's skill sets that aren't good enough; they just don't exist. And that's exactly what I found at Alpine. There are pockets of the organization that the skill level is at a very elementary level, and that's because the people they have there, were college graduates, for example, as opposed to somebody with 25 years of knowledge. In those areas, that's where we needed to recruit people with good experience. But the best in Formula One are usually on long-term contracts, at least 3 years. And to get them to change, I always say, if you go to an engineer that or a aerodynamicist that at Red Bull and say, hey, come here and work at Alpine. Well, they're winning world championships, winning races. What is so compelling to make them say, you know what, I want to stop winning races at Red Bull and come join you at Alpine? There's got to be a compelling reason to do so. And I was able to convince quite a few people in areas that we needed to bolster. But unfortunately, they were to come in, some in the autumn of 23, most of them mid 24, and some of them in 2025. And that's what I try to explain, that, look, it's happening, it's coming. And sometimes, you take a half step backwards to take two forward. And they just didn't have, I don't know, they didn't have that understanding. Either it was impatience and or it was emotion, but definitely no understanding. And unfortunately, that's what it takes, and that's what they'll find. And they wanted it quicker, but not through me.
When did they want it to occur? Was it to happen immediately?
Yeah, immediately. Fighting for wins next year. Well, that's not going to happen, especially when you've got a 20 to 30 horsepower deficit locked in. It's just not going to happen. Even if the chassis is the same, the drivers are the best in the world. If you got a 20 to 30 horsepower deficit that's frozen in, you're not going to win. You're not going to come close to winning. But you need to have an understanding of what you're doing to make those good decisions. There's a famous psychologist. Well, I don't know how famous he is, but David Dunning at the University of Michigan, a Stanford grad, and he's won some awards in just starting to understand the psychology of not knowing, but believing that you know more than you know. And I think it's the Dunning-Kruger effect is famous. It's one of his famous writings, but he's done even further work than that. So if you look at his work, it just boggles the mind that sometimes the very important decisions we make, and we only make those a few times in our lives, so we don't have experience in making them, that we don't seek counsel from those who do have the experience. We often, as humans, seek counsel from those who don't have the experience. And that is just foreign to me. I mean, I'm sure I suffer from it too, but hopefully not to that extent.
When you were at Aston Martin, one of the buzz phrases that you used often was called psychological safety. And you said
I found long time ago, when I first started in Formula One in 1998, I came from Ford Motor Company, and I worked there for 12 years as an engineer, as a product planner, as a business planner. So I had a variety of jobs there, including 1 year in motorsport engineering. And when I first came to British American Racing, Adrian Reynard at the time said, we're going to win our first race, because every formula that I've ever embarked on, I've won my first race. And I believed him, because the level of engineering there was so high compared to Ford Motor Company. I was amazed at how good, how quick, how accurate the engineers were. We had engineers at, and this happens, This happens everywhere in Formula One. They're design engineers, so they're engineers that design at the same time, which renders a lot of efficiencies. Where at Ford, engineers didn't design; you had a designer sitting next to you, so it was different. And I was amazed at the level of engineering that takes place in Formula One. So I believed Adrian when he said we're going to win our first race. I said for sure we're going to win our first race. These guys are geniuses. We didn't score 1 point in the first year. So what that taught me is, as good as these people were all working together, the others were even better. And then I thought, okay, if that's the case, how do you get the best of the best together, keep them happy such that they produce race-winning cars? And that's when I started looking into high-performing teams and what it takes, and stumbled across psychological safety, because we all have to take risks at work, especially in Formula One. It's creative engineering. It's not just solid engineering. You have to be creative and push the boundaries.
Right.
It's not like civil engineering where you overcompensate to make sure that bridge never, ever fails. It's not that. If you do that in Formula One, you're never going to win. So you have to take some risks in engineering, and you have to be creative. And if you don't have the psychological safety at work, you stop taking those risks, and you mainly worry about making sure that nothing you produce fails, not that it's on the edge of failure, but not failing and have the best performance. And that's exactly what the environment you need in Formula One, such that people take calculated risks without the fear of having, losing their jobs, for example, or having their bosses talk down on them, or reprimand them. So that, to me, is really important in a high-performing team like Formula One.
Did you feel you had the psychological safety at Renault?
It looks like now, in hindsight, I didn't, but I didn't worry about that for myself. Mm-hmm. What I worried about was that for those people who worked for me and those who also worked for my direct reports. That's what I try to instill in that organization. Was not psychological safety for me, because I wasn't worried about that, but psychological safety for them, so they can take the risks they needed to push and progress on track performance.
With everything that Alpine is trying to do, and you've referenced this in the past in previous interviews, building a brand, building a distribution network, building a Formula One team, is it too much for the organization to take on at one time?
It might be too much for an organization to take on that doesn't have experience in doing it. If you have the experience in doing it, then it can be done. But if you embark on this with people that have no experience in it, you're going to fail.
Yeah. You've also said success doesn't happen overnight. In fact, you've referenced the building blocks that have to be in place. You cite some pretty good examples. Red Bull, especially after buying Jaguar, took 5 years. They started winning. Aston Martin, 2018. Now we see the results in 2023. 5 years.
And they're still not winning. They've done a superb job from last year to this year. That's for sure. However, those people that did that job were put in place 2019, 2020. Some of them, one of the first ones I recruited signed in December of 2020. Right here it is, 2023, is one of the senior engineers. The others that we recruited from Mercedes and Red Bull came thereafter. But like I said, it takes time. Lawrence has owned that team for 5 years now, and they're not winning. Yes, they've had a great year, but they're still not winning.
He's also poured a ton of money into it too.
A lot of money, and a lot of people. And, to give Lawrence credit, he relied on myself and Andrew Green mainly to recruit the right people. So the two of us recruited those people. It wasn't Lawrence saying, hey, go get this guy or go get that guy because he didn't know who the people were. But Lawrence was smart enough to realize he didn't know and let us go ahead and do it.
So when you took on the assignment, it was your assumption that you would have at least a long enough runway to make an impact.
Yeah. So the runway that was afforded me, and this is in the press everywhere, was 100 races. And I think I got 33, 34 into it.
Yeah.
And 100 races times 20, if it's 20 a year, is 5 years. I mean, I know we're racing a little bit more than 20 now, whatever it is, 24. So it's between 4 and 5 years. And I thought that's long enough. That is long enough to get the right people in place. You need about 6 months, 6 to 9 months to understand what's really required, the skill sets that you have, what you're lacking, and then aggressively start recruiting. And I think I aggressively started recruiting at Alpine 3 months into it. They already had a plan called the Mountain Climber, which they recognized that they needed to recruit in some areas. And then I started helping with that. I mean, after 26 years in the business, some of the people at other teams that are capable and competent, and then you go after them. And some I was successful in getting them to leave their teams and come. And there are others that I talked to quite a bit where they said no. I like it here at Red Bull, for example, and I've got opportunities in the future, and I'm going to stick it out here. So I wasn't 100% successful in recruiting the people that were required, but I had more than one on the list for each one of the jobs. So if the number one fellow said, no, I'd rather not come, I'd go to the number two guy. And that's what I was doing. And have about 6 to 8. 2 have started already, and another 6 to come signed up. And, that's what it takes, really.
One of your former drivers, Checo Perez, said Otmar lacked the time to really show his potential. He just came out yesterday and said that.
Yeah, Checo and I worked together, for some time. And the nice thing with Checo is he saw the progression. He was there long enough to see us go from, one of the backmarker teams to the best of the rest. And he saw what I did and the method that I applied, how I did it. So he, as a driver, was there for all of that. So he's got a good understanding.
Before we get back to this interview, I want to say that this episode is brought to you by Connected by Reynolds & Reynolds. If you want to hear great conversations and Greg Ulan going deep with guests on everything from used car acquisitions to finding your niche and selling to it, I recommend adding Connected to your podcast rotation. Now let's get back to my interview.
Is the sport, it's been talked about before, many of your contemporaries and colleagues have said, the job of an F1 team principal is just brutal. The pressure is intense. The expectations are unrealistic at certain levels. You're on top of the world, maybe you're Toto Wolff on top of the world for nearly a decade, and then all of a sudden you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, so the way I look at it, there's always 2 teams that are happy in Formula One, or 2 types of teams. One, the team that's winning. So if you're Red Bull now, you're happy. And 2, the team or teams that are exceeding expectations. So if your owners or managers, seniors think, you know what, we've put enough money in to be 6th and you finish 4th, they're super happy. Or we've put enough money in to be 8th and you're 6th, they're super happy. The rest of them either have false expectations. You don't have the infrastructure, the people that's required, and then they take it out on the team principal. And sure, that can be stressful. I think it's no different than if you don't really have control, but you are held responsible. A little bit like if you're a waitress, you don't control the quality of the food, but the customer holds you responsible. Mm-hmm. And that can happen, unrealistic expectations by the owners or by the senior managers can be stressful. For me, I don't, it's the right word. I don't really feel the stress. I do the best to my ability. I don't worry about things that are out of my control. I do worry about things that are in my control and I plan and execute to make those things better. And that's how I've always done it.
You've also said that Formula One those within the operation need to act like pirates, not the Navy. And I'm guessing you were kind of a little more in the Navy recently.
Well, it's funny that one thing that happened at Alpine that doesn't really happen at other places is the parent company wanted to have a lot of control in a lot of areas of the racing team, more than I've ever seen before. The commercial area, the marketing area, HR, finance, communication, all that stuff reported not to me, but around me, to somebody else in the bigger organization. And they all act like pirates. They all act like a Navy. And we have to be pirates in order to win. So again, if you say all else equal, the car's equal, the drivers are equal, the powertrain's equal, your knowledge of the tires is equal. But what isn't equal is the fact that a Mercedes or a Red Bull have HR, finance, especially finance now because of the cost cap, all the commercial aspects and communication reporting to Christian, and we don't. Guess who's going to win?
Right. Yeah.
Red Bull. And when you look at it that way, it's really, really easy to understand. If you don't look at it that way, then you can convince yourself that, oh, yeah, that's okay. It's okay that HR doesn't report through the team principal. It's not okay. It's not okay at all, because if you're going to hire somebody and you've got to get a contract out within a day, because that's what we do in Formula One, you can't take 2 weeks. If it takes you 2 weeks, maybe that special hire went somewhere else. You got to be pirates.
Smaller, less structure, better off you are.
Smaller, and it's only smaller, less structure, because if you don't have the structure, you can make quicker decisions. If you have the structure and the decisions happen quickly, that's okay too. But it doesn't work that way. You've got other people to consult. They've got to then consult others. They then have to deliberate. Sometimes you got to put a committee together. The committee then decides. That all takes time. And sometimes the decision's wrong as well.
You've also said that trust, I mean, a couple of principles that have to exist within a Formula One team. Trust, you've got to know what you're working for, who you're working for, and no politics. Just go racing. Do what's best for the car with the on-track performance.
Absolutely right. If you have politics that come in, and sometimes you make a decision that's politically beneficial to you, but goes against on-track performance, and you've got that dilemma, and you side on the political benefit at the expense of on-track performance. Again, it's suboptimal, and you can't have that in Formula One. You can't have to make those suboptimal decisions. And I've seen it. It happens.
So if there was a little more experience, if there was a little more context, maybe a little more patience at Alpine, could you have had a much better, more successful run? I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Yeah, definitely. In the future, like I said, there's some really, really good people coming. The part of the organization that I was responsible for had the biggest influence of on-track performance. I mean, that was the part I was responsible for. So recruiting those people, working hard, making sure that we did have that psychological safety to take calculated risks. All that was happening, and I also embarked on having the FIA and the other teams look at the inequality of the engine, the powertrain performance. That was happening too. So had I been successful in getting powertrain parity, instantly, if we had parity at Silverstone, we would have been 4 to 5 tenths a lap quicker, and at Spa it was 7 tenths of a lap quicker in race form. So those things I was pushing on, and I think with time, some of that stuff, if not all of it, would have come to fruition, and the on-track performance would have increased. But like I say, it takes time.
One more question on this, then we'll talk about the future. When did you feel that the leash was getting shorter? When did you feel that this was imminent?
Well, I mean, I saw what was said by some of the seniors in the press at
Miami,
and I wasn't consulted at all.
The team was called Amateur and a bunch of dilettantes.
Yes, and to me, you don't air your dirty laundry. If that's what you think, that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. They're not entitled to their own facts, though.
Mm-hmm.
But have the discussion, have a good understanding. And if we were amateurish, we'd be the first to say, hey, we don't want to be amateurs. Let's change it. What does it take? Every Formula One team, because we do take those risks that I talked about before, makes mistakes. You can look at every race, and at every race, somebody is because you push the boundaries. You either have a slow pit stop, or you crash on the first lap, or you come in for a nose change and it takes 14 seconds, not 10 seconds, because you couldn't get the wrench in quickly enough, or whatever it was. So we definitely weren't perfect, but yeah, the first time that I thought this is a warning was when some of the seniors within Renault decided that it was a good idea to go to the press without talking to the team first.
Then you got a podium in Monaco the next week.
Yeah, in Monaco, Monaco's the track where engine performance is the least meaningful. We qualified fourth on merit, and we finished third on merit. And that's because the 20 to 30 horsepower deficit is less meaningful. It doesn't matter as much. So now you've got, capable drivers, a good chassis, a well-executed race, and we're on the podium.
Yeah. Your future. You've said recently 12 months means no Formula One teamwork, but there are other things in Formula One I can do. You're on garden leave, as they say in Europe.
Yeah. So I'm going to take, everyone's on break now. So I'm going to do the same, spend another week, 10 days on break, driving around, like I said. And then come September, I'll take Finley back to Dartmouth, maybe watch a golf match or two, and then come back and, start the process of my next challenge in earnest. So yeah, there's some, opportunities out there that aren't Formula One teams yet, where I think I could be useful.
Possibility of contributing to someone's success in the future as a burgeoning team rises.
Maybe, that might be one possibility.
Right. You could go work for an engine manufacturer. You could go work for F1 Experiences. You could do a myriad of things, correct?
Yeah. Maybe Sky.
Right. Exactly. When you look at the state of Formula One right now, I think you're in a perfect position to describe this for us. Stepping back now a little bit, where is Formula One from a maybe a cultural perspective, but also a business perspective? I mean, we've seen one of the first races you went to was in Detroit in 1982. I'm thinking, and I was at the same race, and what I saw in the crowd were Europeans and South Americans, but not a lot of Americans. Now, thanks to a myriad of things, one being Netflix, it seems more popular than ever in North America. Give me kind of Otmar's view of where Formula One is, both in this country and outside of it.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think Netflix was a big help in illustrating or exemplifying to those who watch Netflix what our sport is really about. The sport's always been great. It's just I don't think we had the media attraction to show the world how good it is. And I think both Netflix and the fact that right after Netflix, the world was locked down due to COVID, and the only live sport you could watch was Formula One for a period. And I think that combination attracted some fans that we otherwise wouldn't have attracted. Now, to me, I think the sport is, I mean, I love racing, so I have a certain bias, but the sport is definitely entertaining enough to keep those new fans for a very long time. So I think, once you attract them through whatever means, Netflix, COVID, or now word of mouth, people who have watched Netflix will tell their friends, oh, you gotta watch this Formula One. It's great. And if the show is entertaining enough, which I believe it is, we will keep those fans for a long time. And for me, from a business perspective, like any business, it's about future growth. How can you grow this? And we had the NFL commissioner come talk to us in the team principals in Canada. And he said exactly the same. And I was thinking of this before he said it. He said, look, you've broken through in the US. Now take it to the next level. And I think those are wise words. And and I think we've broken through in other regions too. Now take it to the next level. So again, to me, it's about growth, and growth is make sure that the product is great and tell everybody.
Is the product great? Because what we've seen this year is, some of the criticism that's been levied, but goes back to your power unit example that there are only so many teams that have the capability to compete any given week.
Now, that's a conundrum I always think about. When the NFL has this saying, on any given Sunday, anybody can win. It's harder to do in Formula One. And it's never really happened that way. But I still believe that the sport, even though, we've only had Red Bull win this year, is still great. The racing's still good. There's racing in the midfield that's exceptional. The TV broadcasters have to do a good job to show the racing, such that the audience enjoys it. And we've had sellouts now the entire year, and I know the people who actually attend the races in person. Even though Red Bull win them all, they still have a great time and they've enjoyed their weekends.
Yeah, it is a conundrum as it relates to the powertrain units. It's also a conundrum when you think about how much money is spent among the various teams. Is there, in theory, an unequal playing field?
Yeah, there is a little bit, but the playing field is a lot more equal or even today than it was in the past. However, it's not flat. You know what I mean? But it's just a lot better today than it was in the past. So there are within the cost cap, some loopholes that are exploited more by some teams than others. There are probably still some teams that don't spend all the way up to the cost cap. However, because there is a cost cap, that the variation or the delta between the least spending team and the most spending team is a lot smaller today than it was in the past, and that helps.
You were recently back in Michigan, and you moved to Michigan when you were 8 years old. And some may not know the story. I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes on this. When you moved to North America, you moved from a very rural village in Romania. And I know you think about those moments quite often. You think about your upbringing, you think about where you came from, and the fact that you were actually in a very happy place living in that small village in communist Romania. Do you think about those times a lot, Otmar?
I do. They had and I just thought of it the other day that my children, for example, didn't have the variability of the experience or the difference of the experience that I had. So, growing up from birth to 8 years old, I my first grade classroom was a split classroom with one teacher. She taught first grade and third grade at the same time. Now, those types of classroom settings, I remember reading about that those things took place in, say, the 1800s in America. But I experienced that.
In the 1970s.
Yeah, in the 1970s. I experienced most of the people having, as a mode of transportation, horse-drawn carriages. I experienced the fact that we didn't have a telephone or a television in the house or running water. I lived it.
There were two cars in the village. Your dad had one, and the doctor had the other.
And at one point, there was one, the doctor, and then my dad, through the luck of a lottery, which I think was fixed, but I have no way of knowing. He won a car in the lottery. I mean, he didn't even play the lottery, which gives you a bit of a clue, right? So we had a car. There are two cars in the village, and yeah. So I look back at those experiences, and I'm better off for it. I am better off for it. I'm better off for being able to. My cousin lived across the street. They had two cherry trees in their front garden, one of which the cherries ripened about 2 weeks after the first one. And my memories of climbing up that cherry tree, sitting there eating cherries until I was sick because they were so good. That I'm happy I experienced that.
You had to go 3 doors down to see the house that had the cow.
Exactly. And I remember walking and I was probably 4 years old, and it was dark when we used to go get the milk. And my dad telling me, said, don't worry, the moon will walk with you, and the moon will never leave your side. And I remember looking up, seeing the moon, and he was right. That moon stayed by my side all the way. I was 4 years old to get the milk and come back. And mind you, in rural Romania, there was no light pollution. I mean, it was so dark you couldn't see. I mean, your eyes had to dilate before you could see anything.
And we spent the first 35 minutes of this conversation talking about a sport that's a global multi-billion-dollar sport. You must just sort of pinch yourself and go, the kid from Romania, the village in Romania, where life was fun and rewarding and rudimentary, you had electricity, but no running water, no television, has just spent time talking about how his days as a team principal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey, and I got here through, my grandmother used to always say, what would you rather have? All the gold in the world, because back then to them it wasn't currency, it was about gold. That was something that had value. Or all the understanding in the world. And and as a kid you would say, I'd love to have all the gold in the world. And she used to always say, no, understanding is much more important than having all the gold in the world. And she would teach me that kind of stuff as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old. And I think if you seek understanding, and if you seek understanding of people, you can put, and you have empathy, you can lead a team. You have to have a good understanding as well. I think to be a team principal, the best team principals have a good technological understanding too, not just people. So if you're an engineer and understand people, I think you're a little bit better off.
Do you have more understanding today?
That's what it's about. Pardon?
Do you have more understanding today?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to have studied engineering undergrad and also did an MBA. And in the MBA, you learn a little bit about organizational behavior and organizational structure and a bit of psychology. And if you mix all that and have a bit of empathy, then you can put a good team together.
A belated happy birthday again, Otmar.
Thank you.
We wish you the best of luck and the best wishes for your next year, and good luck on the six-pack too.
Yeah, well, that's a short-term goal. And then, I started today. I couldn't start yesterday because, like I said, the neighbors invited me over for lunch. And I couldn't say, you know what, yeah, you guys go ahead and eat, but I've started on the six-pack at 60. So I'm just going to have the salad. But today, the request to my wife is going to be salad for dinner, please.
Well,
and she
wonderful.
makes some good ones. I look forward to them.
Wonderful. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you.
Thanks again to my guest today, former F1 team principal Otmar Szafnauer. And to see my interview with Otmar, go to the Cars and Culture YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to see more than 100 interviews. Thanks for listening. You can follow Cars and Culture on LinkedIn and Facebook, as well as on Instagram at Cars and Culture SXM and on Twitter at Cars Culture SXM. I'm Jason Stein. We'll see you down the road.